So do you ever sit and find yourself being like, I am the goofiest of goobers when making your art because you make silly little mistakes? But luckily for you, that's what this video is about. Here are 7 beginner art mistakes artists make and how to fix them. Let's get right into it, shall we? Also, I got me a Nightmare Before Christmas tree? Nightmare Before Christmas tree? Getting in the Halloween spirit. And these are 7 mistakes I've personally made myself as a beginner artist. So I've been there, done that. So I'm gonna help you try to avoid being there and doing that. First up on the list is not having enough room to finish your drawing. So you go in trying to do a full detailed drawing before mapping it out. You start with the head, and by the time you get to the feet, you realize you ain't got any space left. And we can see in this example right here, I did exactly that. I didn't use any underlying basic shapes or not like that, or construction lines. I went in, instantly drew in the head, and then started full detailed body work. And then by the time I got to the legs, I realized didn't have enough room for the feet. So I just continued off the canvas and just never drew them. But if you see in this example right here, if I would have went in with basic construction lines and basic shapes, I would have had a clear vision of how big my character would have been, and I could have easily fit the whole figure onto the page. And number 2, not going dark enough with your coloring or shading. A lot of beginner artists, they're scared to go too dark when they're drawing, simply because once you go too dark, it's hard to erase. But if we look at this example I did of a drawing of Iron Man, yeah, it looks good, but if y'all see right here, when I turn up the contrast and make it a lot darker, it looks a lot better. I think this is probably my 4th portrait I started with, so I was still scared to go too dark with my colors because if I messed up, it was easy to erase if I kept it light. So I just never did dark portraits. But this ain't only for black and white drawings, this is also for coloring. Don't be afraid to use darker colors when you're doing your color drawings for like colored pencils or paints or anything like that, watercolor as well. And number 3, don't care too much about being perfect. Yes, in the end, you want a fine result. You don't want something that looks super sloppy. But then again, if you spend 5 minutes redrawing the exact same line, you could have spent that 5 minutes drawing a little figure gesture drawing or something like that. So spend your time wisely. Don't just keep making the same mistake over and over and over. If you find yourself making the same mistake, try to draw something different. Try to draw something new. Just get your mind off of it. And then later on, when you got a fresh mind, come back to it. And you'll probably end up seeing a lot more progress that way. This also ties in with this. Fill a page just with random stuff. Just don't even go in with a vision of what you want to draw. Just plot stuff down on the page. Do what your hand feels like it's telling you. And sometimes you'll come up with some interesting things on your page. Like this little rabbit thing that looks like Moe, the bartender from The Simpsons. Number 4, drawing your sketch lines too dark. Yes, I said number 2, artists are afraid to shade too dark or color too dark, and I still stand by that. But when I say your sketch lines are too dark, you gotta remember your sketch is your map for how your finished product is gonna look. Because when you're first starting out, you don't really know what your finished product is gonna look like just yet. In your sketch, you don't want to draw your sketch lines too dark, because if you do, if you make a mistake, like we see in this example right here, the shoulder blade is way too wide on the right side than it is the left. So when I go to erase it, I find myself seeing that it's not really coming off the page. So I'm either 1, going to start a whole new sketch, or 2, try to work that little mistake into my artwork. And sometimes yes, that does work, and sometimes no, that doesn't work, and sometimes you will just have to start a whole new piece. But you can avoid that by just simply lightening up your grip and just doing your sketch a little bit lighter. And number 5 on the list is actually tangents. And if you don't know what tangents are, I'm going to pull up this example from Mitch Leanwe. I don't know if I'm saying his last name right, but his first name is Mitch. If we look at this example from him, he shows you what not to do on the left and how to fix it on the right. So you don't want a lot of lines converging to the same point, and then you don't want lines just touching each other, if that makes sense. So if we look at the eyes here, we have them overlapping in the second one, but on the first one, they just kind of sit next to each other. So don't look horrible, but it could look better. And if we look at the third example here, this would be like a nose or something like that on a cartoon. Instead of the nose just meeting the side of the face, he actually pushes it forward a little bit to overlap it, and that also creates depth in your drawing. So not only are you avoiding tangents, but you're also adding depth. But that's just a few examples of tangents. There's many, many more, but just try to avoid them. And you can usually avoid them by just shifting the lines either left or right just a little bit to create a little bit of overlap, and that'll usually solve your problem. And number 6 on the list is actually flipping your canvas. And if you're saying, well, I'm a traditional artist, I just can't flip my canvas, it'll turn upside down. true, but you can take a picture of it and then use your phone's photo editing software to just flip the canvas through your phone. And when I was a beginner artist, I thought this tip was kind of bullcrap. I didn't really believe it, so I never did it. But once I did start using it, man, it points out a lot of things you wouldn't notice otherwise. Because if you're sitting drawing the same thing, like say you're working on a portrait, and you're sitting there looking at it for hours, eventually your mind's going to trick you into thinking what you're looking at is correct, if that makes sense. Because your brain is getting used to looking at that, so it looks correct. But if you flip it, your brain won't conceive it as the same image, if that makes sense. So it's going to be a fresh image to your mind, and when that happens, you will see all the mistakes that you wouldn't rather see if you didn't flip the canvas. So in the beginning, I never did do this, but now I do this with every single drawing, especially if it's a portrait. Number 7 on the list, last but not least, is just not using references. Most of the time, beginner artists don't ever use references. They think professional artists just draw straight out of their head. While yes, some professional artists can do that, most cannot, and most of us still actually use references. Now, will you find the perfect reference every single time for what you want to draw? Probably not. So sometimes you got to find a few references and kind of mash them together to get what you're wanting, because you're not really wanting to copy your reference. But copying your reference is okay as long as you're not claiming that it's your art, it's someone else's art. You just kind of, even if you didn't trace it, you're still kind of copying their art, if that makes sense. So as long as you're not saying that it's yours 100%, then that's all right. Or if you're just copying it to learn anatomy or something like that, then that's okay. But don't claim a copy of someone else's art as your own. If we look at this example right here, this is a Spider-Man I did with no reference. I just tried to draw this out of my head versus a Spider-Man I did with reference. I actually copied this drawing from one of the covers of the comic book. I'm forgetting which one. But as you see, when I used a reference, it turned out 100 times better than when I didn't use a reference. So that's why I highly encourage always using a reference no matter what you're drawing. If that's a landscape, buildings, people, animals, anything like that. If you're drawing something, always use a reference. But that pretty much does it for today's video. That's 7 beginner art mistakes artists make and how to fix them. If you're a beginner artist and you make any of these mistakes and this video helps you to avoid these mistakes, tell me about it in the comments. Or if you have any art you want to share with me, I'd love to see it over on Instagram where I like it, share it to my page. But y'all already know, like, comment, subscribe, share with a friend, and I'll see you next week.